later on, as you all know, Foley's been a great sports town, and have always participated in the sports in the high schools or in the community and so forth. And at that particular time, Kenny Stabler was playing football for the high school, City of Foley. And then he got a scholarship to go to the University of Alabama. And he played in the Bowl in Mobile. And after that, he went to the university, and there again was a star player for the University of Alabama. And he got the Oakland Raiders drafted him to play football for them at Oakland Raiders. And he ended up being the most valuable player of the national national players. And then he was playing in the Super Bowl in California, in Los Angeles, California. And myself and a few others from Foley and South Baldwin County went to the Super Bowl. When we got tickets from Stabler, and my wife and I were sitting with his mother at the Super Bowl, which he won and was named the most valuable player in the Super Bowl. That all brought big recognition back to the city of Foley. And Stabler's name was known all over the country, and I saw him play for several different teams in different cities. Several months before he was inducted to the Super Bowl Hall of Fame, he had passed away with a cancer growth. And unfortunately, his sister is still living here in Summerdale. But his recognition and his playing ability, and incidentally, when he went to play for the Oakland Raiders, the New York Yankees had tried to get him as a pitcher from pitching high school here. And he pitched a no-hit baseball game in the Foley Park against Don Sutton. He was pitching against Don Sutton at the Foley Baseball Park and pitched a no-hitter against Don Sutton. And he went on to be the most valuable player of the Yankees. At so many places I had the honor of being while mayor. I had a great time being mayor. I enjoyed it. I had great councilmen. And what I enjoyed working with my councilmen. And we were the first sitting government in this building when it was brand new in the 70s, in the mid-70s. So I was the first sitting governor. I was on the building committee that helped design it, but it's all been paid for. I added on to, and then I spent 54 years on the board of the governors of Riviera Utilities. And I'd venture to say Riviera Utilities is owned lock, stock, and barrel by the city of Foley. The citizens of the city of Foley own Riviera Utilities. And today, they'd have no trouble whatsoever probably getting $500 million for it. It's a valuable piece of property. They own all the power lines to the city limits of Mobile, all the Daphne, Spanish Fort, Malbus, Loxley, Daphne, I told you, around the downtown area of Fairhope, down to the Grand Hotel. They served the Grand Hotel. They served Silver Hill and around Robertsdale, Summerdale, Alberta, Lillian. The city of Foley owns all that property. Now, we never did go to Gulf Shores, and that was mainly because at the time it was purchased was in 42. Mr. Limler was the general manager for Edison States, who owned Riviera Utility. And he talked the mayor and the governing body to buy. He was going to be transferred. And he liked Foley. He wanted to stay in Foley. And he talked the mayor and the council in buying it because they could buy what they were paying taxes for. At the federal income tax, what the utility company was paying the federal government. And so he was really the father of it, and then they appointed 2 board members in addition to the operating capital. And later on, while we were in office, if the city owned it, we felt like the city government should have say-so. So we got a bill put through the legislature. Mr. Brannon was on the city council at the time, and he introduced the bill in the legislature in Montgomery to increase the number of members from 3 to 5 on a municipally owned utility system. And so we were able to put 2 more members on the utility system. And at that particular time, I spoke at the House of Representatives, and they voted in favor of us. And then the city council put me as one of the first members, along with Martin Crosby, on the utility board, where we had 5 members on the utility board. But the city government can always have representatives on it, but not more than 2. But that gives them a little say-so about what happened at Riviera Utilities, too. When I got to be mayor, I was sent to Montgomery to the Mayor's Association. The state Alabama League of Municipalities is a true name of it. And I was on it for about 10 years. And then I was elected president of the Alabama League of Municipalities. And that's the largest municipal organization in the United States. The Alabama League of Municipalities in Alabama has the largest municipal elected officials governing body in the United States. And I stayed on that board 20-something years as a representative of the city of Foley. And at that time, while I was up there, George Wallace, Governor Wallace, appointed me to the Alabama Airport Authority. And then after serving that term, Bob James was elected governor, and he reappointed me. And after Bob James left, Guy Hunt reappointed me. And normally that's a no-no. A governor goes in office, they really like to have their own representatives to the different positions of office in the state of Alabama. But it seemed like for a while there, I was being reappointed a little bit of everything. And at one time, I'll never forget, I was appointed Commission of Higher Education, and then George Wallace had to withdraw my appointment. He didn't like to do it, but he had to do it because of a conflict with another state-appointed person. So I've enjoyed life, not only in the city, but in business, and particularly in Foley, Alabama. Baldwin County's got to be one of the best counties you could have anywhere, the way it's being handled. And today, we have the best county government without reservation. We're fortunate to have the setup we have in Baldwin County. You know, I recall being a young boy about how country really Foley was, because there were no paved roads or no sidewalks or nothing. And as a young boy, my daddy had the store, and he would get, the mailman would bring him a lot of grocery orders on a 1-cent stamp, on a little cardboard stamp for 1 cent post office. And then the mailman would come by the next day and pick up the groceries and deliver the groceries while he was delivering the mail. And they'd give him 10 cents or 15 cents for delivering the groceries to him, sort of a tip money for him. And all the different mailmen were, we never knew who was coming by to pick the groceries up the next morning. But anyway, and then going to the beach was a big thing to my parents and to us boys to get to go to the Gulf, to go swimming. And going to the Gulf, that was before the canal was there. And it was a dirt road straight down to the north side of the lagoon, and then the old wooden bridge over the lagoon where the highway is. And just after you cross the wooden bridge, by the oyster bar today, is the dirt road to the right. That we took the dirt road to the right and then went over another little wooden bridge to where the cabins were. And these 5 cabins, it was an 8-room frame hotel there that a couple ran the old hotel. They called it the Gulf Shores Hotel. It burned down later on, but then beside it, it had 2 cabins they rented out on the west side of it, and the 5 wooden cabins were on the east side. And those, at that time, one of those cabins did belong to the hotel. And then Ed Moses owned the next cabin. And then Mr. B.P. Livingston from Montgomery, who was head of the control of the nurseries in the state of Alabama, Mr. Livingston was. And then Mr. Dryce had a cabin right out here. Mr. Dryce lived in Foley. And he had a cabin. And then all of a sudden there was a big push by local people to build Governor Bibb Graves a cabin. And it was built right next to Dr. Holmes' cabin. But that's all only cabins that were there. Then later on, the CC boys in the Roosevelt administration started hauling young men out of New York on the train. And you'd have a train load coming in there maybe on Sunday afternoon. And they'd walk the Gulf Shores after coming in on the train. and they had big barracks, and they cleared out the state park. All that was in state property then, from Gulf Shores to Orange Beach. And that was a big industry, having the CC boys. And Mr. L.G. Hill, he was the manager of the CC camp. He lived here in Foley on Magnolia Street. But his family, his children went to school. He had 3 children. And they went to school at Foley High School. And his oldest son graduated in 38. And the CC boys built a winding road into where the boathouse is today. I knew how to get to the lake and to the Gulf. And we all liked both places to swim, because the 3 middle lakes, what we call Lagoon and Lake Shelby, and then Middle Lake and the Little Lake, they were all freshwater. And the story was those lakes were fed underground from Lake Michigan. And although I have never had any proof of it, but the story was the reason they were fresh water, they were fed underground. And but then the CC boys built the state park, and they built the big casino that was later on leased out by Governor Bibb Graves. Leased it to this 2 men that worked in his administration. Well, as a boy, in 1935, over just around Plash Island, I was on my grandfather's little boat, and the whole family was. And we ran ashore on some sand bottoms where they had pumped out dredging, using dredges, and that was a lot of. He ran from Magnolia River around to that canal where they were building the canal, and we got on a sand bottom, and some of the older men had to get overboard to help get the boat off the sandbar. And that canal, all the way through, the story is you could go from Port Arthur, Texas to Apalachicola, Florida, and never go in the Gulf. And there was more tonnage passed through the Gulf Canal than there was in the St. Lawrence Freeway. There was that much more tonnage used in the canal in its early days. But a lot of nights, you'd see 4 or 5 tugboats going through the canal. It was a very active canal, and the tugboats liked it because they could tie up to a bank in the canal when the weather was bad in the Gulf. And Mobile Bay is undoubtedly one of the roughest bays to go across late in the afternoon. Well, my father and uncle, my uncle Arthur, and my father was named George Holk. They used to have the store at Magnolia Springs, and it got torn up in the storm of 1916 when they had the bad storm in the coastal area. But at that time, they had the first Magnolia. It was a smaller boat, and it sank in Weeks Bay. And then they rebuilt or built the Magnolia. The boat Magnolia was a big boat, about 80 feet long, and it hauled groceries from Mobile down to Battles Wharf. It first started in Battles Wharf on the eastern shore, and then came on down and went up Turkey Branch on Fish River, which is a little branch that was offset of the lower end of Fish River. Went up there in the woods store there. One of the ladies that used to work the radio station, her father had that store. From there, it went on up to Grove's store at Marlow, and that's where the Magnolia unloaded groceries there at the ferry in Marlow. Grove's Ferry was across the river. If you went to Fairhope, in my younger days, you had to go to Robertsdale. There was no crossing other than two ferries. Mackenzie Ferry was on the lower part of Fish River, and the northern part, right off of 32, where Grove's store was the other ferry that crossed Fish River. And in the early days, that's the only way you could go to the eastern shore unless you went to Robertsdale. I went over there just a few times as a young boy. The big thing that used to happen in Baldwin County was the May Day Festival at Daphne. And 1st of May, they had what you called the May Day Festival. And of course, the May Day Festival had all your different participants in the counties, mainly that were furnished by the schools, whatever they had a specialty in, or dancing, or whatever it was. But they had a junior teachers college, and my mother's sister, Ms. Massey, got her teaching certificate from May's teaching school that was developed in Daphne at that time. And but those all faded away, and just like the organic school did in Fairhope, and the other schools sort of outgrew them in knowledge and education. But I will say this, the people of Baldwin County and the number of students, it is remarkable, the number of students that left Baldwin County to go into higher education schools such as University of Alabama, Birmingham Southern, Auburn, Troy. They were all considered junior colleges then, except for the major Auburn or Alabama were considered accredited 4-year college. Riviera Utilities always had to be way ahead of time. In other words, when they were going to build any kind of development, you had to have the electricity there first, but you had to pretty much have a guarantee what was going to happen in that particular area. And as you know or see, whatever city you were in, you always had to have the power lines there ahead of time. But you had a more or less a guarantee that they were going. Well then, normally there were two directors of Riviera Utilities that went with the manager and the lawyer that represented the city to go before Standard & Poor's or Moody's and then examine us just to see if we really knew what was going on. And fortunate enough, the board in Foley, Riviera Utilities, has always been up to date on what was going on, whatever their projects were and where they're expanding lines and the approximate cost. And I know one thing. I was up there one time and borrowed $30 million for Riviera Utilities. And that was a lot of money to me. And but it was well proved. But the better we talked up at whoever was examining us, the lower the interest rate would be on those bonds. And that made a big difference in them. And the one time there, particular, we were to follow the town of Tallahassee, Florida. And then all of a sudden, we were still in our rooms at the hotel, and we got a call wanting to know if we could come on over, that the town of Tallahassee was not prepared, and they were prepared to hear us. And we got a 3% interest rate on those bonds, and over and above Tallahassee. So we're right proud of ourselves. And I've always said, there's one thing about Foley. Foley's got people in Foley that are qualified to play in anybody's ball game. One of the boys that was high up in the atmosphere experience, so to speak, was Richard Benson. And Richard and I used to ride our bicycles together to Magnolia Springs and spend a night or two in the woods on the upper part of the river. And we'd just go swimming in the river most anywhere. But Richard and I were real close. And he'd been in a number of big cities in the United States as a young man. His father had finished Foley High School in 1923, best I recall, on 23, but my mother knew him. She was in his class. And but anyway, he was a veterinarian and finished Auburn in 1925 as a veterinary medicine, and then was state veterinarian later on. Well, Richard loved animals like his father did. And Richard was my age. And he moved back to Foley in the late 30s and early 40s, and had a veterinary clinic on the north side of town. And anyway, then while I was at Auburn, he was at Auburn and got his degree in veterinary medicine. And then he went in the Air Force, and he flunked out to being a pilot, but they knew he was a veterinarian. And so he became an officer in atmospheric development, and was in the Air Force, and that's when he took care of Abel and Baker. He was the doctor in charge of Abel and Baker. They were the two monkeys that were put in space, and that was when they were testing to see what the atmosphere would have on a person later on. And he was on an aircraft carrier in the Pacific when they picked up the capsule, and they lowered the capsule on the deck of the aircraft carrier, and there was Richard taking the monkey out of the capsule. And that picture was the cover of Life magazine. And that was one of the major magazines of its day back in the space program. But I also went to my wife and I went with he and his wife to the officers' base in Washington, D.C. He was one of the head doctors up there in the space program then. And incidentally, he died in Tyler, Texas, about 5 years ago. Richard did. But he was a very bright student. Let me tell you one other thing. One time while I was mayor, I got a call from the police department, and they said, "Mayor, you know the FBI is in here investigating you?" I said, "Well, I don't know what about, but anyway." He said, "Well, they've been to see us, and the reason the FBI was there, a doctor from Washington, he and his family were spending their 2 weeks vacation at my cabin at Perdita Beach. And there were no telephones at Perdita Beach at that time. And then they called me and wanted to know if they called me, would I go get that doctor and take him to the Naval Air Station? Not mention to anybody what I was doing. And it turned out, later on, I got the Grit magazine, the old Grit paper, and there were 10 doctors listed, and this doctor's picture was on there. And he was one of the doctors that had to be flown to Houston, Texas, to the medical station in Houston, Texas. If they put anything in space, he had to be at one of these stations to review what was going on. And but it was interesting to me that between my brother and between Dr. Benson and this doctor, my brother at that particular time was a federal health officer where they inspected the military bases. He and 35 men inspected military bases all around the world, from 30 days at one and 30 days at another one. And they were constantly doing that. And here, this was all Secret Service work. And here I am down here knowing what's happening that you weren't supposed to know or to let anybody else know when I was being questioned. South Baldwin Hospital, this was back in the mid-50s when it started. And the Women's Club, of all things, I'll never forget Jen Lou Becker and Shorty Hamburg's wife, Ella Hamburg. They were really promoting a hospital for Foley. Foley was, I think, Holmes Hospital at that time only had about 8 rooms or something, but it was very limited. But Dr. Holmes was well known and well honored, and he was called in as a commander in World War II in the Navy. But he had made arrangements to hire Dr. Plank. Dr. Plank came in and took over his practice at the beginning of the war. Well, in the late 40s, he came in. Anyway, the Women's Club took upon themselves to raise a project, and they located South Baldwin property up there. And part of that property my father owned in there where they built the hospital. So they had to swap him some property, which they did, and later on, I got the property from the family, and it's still in the Holk family. The property is to the northwest of the present hospital. But the women's club spearmented that, and there was demand for hospitals all over the county. So the different women and different organizations got a federal grant for Baldwin County, and they built 3 Hill-Burton hospitals. And the one was in Bay Minette, and one was in Fairhope, where Thomas Hospital is now, and one was in Foley. And they were all 3 Hill-Burton. And now Hill-Burton, no such thing, so to speak, but it's a Foley hospital. The hospital boards, which I'm still on, the official boards, have control of the local hospitals, and our terms in office are appointed by the county commissioners of the county, and but it's been very successful. I personally have been through 3 different administrators of the hospital. It's been a real problem making sure you had a good administrator. And we finally agreed to lease the hospital to Community Health Systems. And the Community Health Systems has done wonders and spent a lot of money up here on South Baldwin Hospital. And it's one of the best rated hospitals over and above the hospitals in Mobile, Pensacola, and Baldwin County. And it has a top rating. I got off the board after a number of years, and my daughter has been put on it. Frances Jones has been put on it to take my place. And it is a good hospital. When I get sick, I can stay right here. From Loxley South, up on north side of Loxley, that's where most of their patients come from, is from Loxley South and Silver Hill and Robertsdale and Magnolia Springs, Bon Secure, and Gulf Shores and Orange Beach, all that area. It's got 108 rooms, and they stay filled. But we got approximately affiliated with 100 doctors. We're well staffed, so to speak, and we've been blocked so far doing the heart transplant. Most of the heart transplants are done in Fairhope. But other than that, well, we're fortunate to have South Baldwin Hospital and the kind of governing body we have. And Community Health Systems, Wayne Smith, they have over 100 hospitals that they control. And Wayne Smith happens to have several pieces of property in Baldwin County. And although its headquarters is Nashville, Tennessee, he's down here quite often. In fact, the matter, he and his wife flew down for my 94th birthday party. But we're fortunate to have somebody that's that closely related to Baldwin County.